Hey, everybody. Welcome back to a 32 All the Way. I am thrilled. I barely slept last night. I finally get to do a wrestling show. Everybody, I'd like you to welcome Stevie Pearson. Stevie Pearson is the author of Memphis Noir and the podcaster, hoster guy, I don't know how to say that properly, of Wrestling at the Movies. Before we talk to Stevie, let's give a little bit of background. I'm so excited. I get to talk about a book and wrestling at the same time. If you'd like to go on Amazon and check out Mr. Pearson's work, it is called Memphis Noir. Here's a little description. In 1979 in Memphis, Tennessee, Sam South, son of second-generation star Bull South, wants to make it big on the professional wrestling circuit, all to win his estranged father's respect. Sadly, the promoter, Harvey Wallbanger, doesn't see him as a top star. But through an audio recording of Harvey's shadier business practices, Sam might just get the chance to prove himself after all. Harvey Wallbanger, however, has his own problems micromanaging his talent. Former wrestler turned church pastor Bull South, who co-owns the territory, has turned to religion. Now he and Harvey are at odds with one another. Hopefully he and his aide-de-camp, Vixen Vegas, can amend any and all problems that the Lord might cause for the territory. The Golden Warrior, Ron Golden, is on the verge of losing his world title, and in a turn, a whole load of money. There's something that the tearaway daughter and avarice wife aren't going to be too happy about. The Chattanooga Nightmare, Hex Clearfield, is one of the few remaining free agents in wrestling. His services are well sought after. Sadly, his bodacious attitude and lust for women might be more than the Memphis faithful and the fearsome Monroeville Mauler are willing to contend with. Both Hex and his promoter, Milton Morton, may have their work cut out for them in the cutthroat territory of Memphis, Tennessee. One way or another, everyone is finding out that wrestling might be fake, but business is about to get real in Memphis. Stevie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Wow, that's a hell of an intro. Thank you kindly.
You know what? I just liked it's written, and I'm a big geek fan when it comes to wrestling, so I'm like, I'm going to hit the whole thing, and then we'll talk to him. We've decided to do this as a podcast because you are having some problems, so let's give, because I'm recording it anyway, let's give everybody the nice big shot of Memphis Noir. Here's your picture up on the screen. We'll leave that up while we're talking. The information's right at the top if anybody wants to do it. So let's start from the top. Why Memphis?
Well, the whole plan for this book saga, is I'm intentionally plan to cover 10 books over the course of 10 separate territories, which will obviously mirror the 1980s rock and wrestle era.
Okay.
Obviously, which, as we know, whittled down to maybe 2 or 3 territories toward the end. So basically, the plan is to kind of have a sort of historical, fictional counterpart to the real happenstance, the real territories, and whittle it down to a few. And I just thought, well, I'm going to have to start somewhere. Didn't want to start with New York, which would obviously be the predominant one and the largest one. Kind of want to start on a smaller scale and then build up to the bigger territories as I went along. And I just thought, there's just something about Memphis wrestling that just always appealed to me. And I'm a big fan of the King and Jerry Lawler. And I just thought Memphis was just the best place to start. I don't know why, something just clicked and I just thought, yep, let's go real in Memphis. And we'll just go from there. And that was my plan.
It's interesting that you're talking 10 books because as soon as it said Memphis, again, being a fan and I'd like to think a little bit of historian of the sport, I'm aware of the lengthy history in Memphis, but I was thinking other ones last night. I'm like, Florida, we could easily put this in Florida, although it'd have to probably be in the 70s. We could put it in Los Angeles. The actual territories, I hate to sound like an old timer. I'm only a little bit older than you from our discussion earlier today, but I don't think people understand this whole idea of the territories. And basically what we seem to have now is the big show rolls into town, the WWE, maybe, Ring of Honor, maybe TNA, or you get, the local kids putting on a show.
Sure.
I think I personally can't get enough of the territories. Listen to the Jim Cornette podcast and those guys. And it's just, is this more of a, I guess what I'm getting at, is this more of a, the whole life, I guess I'm getting at. If we're talking the territories, I haven't had a chance to read yours yet, but I'm assuming, we're everything that we've mentioned in in the write-up. That's why I wanted to read it. Like, we're talking about the families, not being happy about this. We're talking about the locals not being happy about this. Like, this was not something that came to town in Memphis. Like, Memphis was a big deal for well over 30 years.
Sure. Well, for me, it's I'll tell you a quick little story.
Okay.
Subconsciously, when I was about 12 years old, I remember you'd watch wrestling on TV, but there was obviously no internet, and there was no real magazines about except, say, the APTA magazines, so like PWI, but they were always sort of kayfabe. And I remember in '92, they ran a piece on Jacques Rougeau's The Mountie, and the Mountie was obviously a heel on TV, and he had a shock stick and what have you. But this magazine, he'd sort of turned babyface in '92 so that they could draw money with a load of houses in the Montreal area, where I believe the Mountie was
another great territory I forgot about.
That's the one. Yeah, Montreal was great in the days as well too. And I remember they had like a big 3-page spread on him and that, and a real interview and stuff, and they were really kind of going for the whole he's a really good guy sort of thing. And there was just a picture there with him and 2 children, basically, his two children, like he had a baby in his arm and a kid next to him. And I remember being 12 years old, my brain couldn't process the fact that this man could be such a dastardly evil character on TV, but in the real world was actually had found a woman that, he was just a regular guy who had a family and a wife and children. It's just, I'm in my little fan brain just couldn't process that. And it was just like, well, maybe this is a setup so he can get vengeance on someone later down the line or whatever. It's just, I kind of sort of, at a young age, I kind of looked at, well, who are these guys? What do they do? What do they do when they're not wrestling? What's their sort of lifestyle? What's their sort of situation? What's their background, etc.? And I just wanted to write sort of from that angle, basically. So it's like you get one character in a book and you sit and write, who is this guy? What's his background? Where do you go from him as a character? And that's where it all started from, really, with me.
That's great. Now, since we're talking Memphis, and in the write-up you are talking father-son, are we mirroring Lawler and his boy? Are we mirroring superstar Bill Dundee and his boy?
Kind of.
Is there any of that coming on?
Kind of. I remember watching a documentary Beyond the Mat years back, which is a very, very good documentary. And,
yeah.
I remember sort of seeing this story of where you had Jake the Snake Roberts and his father, and they were really, really awkward and really strange for one another, and they had this real sort of odd, disconnected sort of vibe about them. And it just made me think about sort of if you read into it, there's a lot of times you'll get sort of second generation wrestlers, and they're really jarring at times with one another.
Yes.
And or it's the opposite. You get sort of ones that idolize their father and idolize their parents, and it's such an awkward sort of angle to look at, because this isn't sort of a 9-to-5 job, obviously. Especially back in them days, it was obviously a very private job and a very different job to what say a plumber did. Or a teacher like yourself. So, it wasn't a regular job, basically. And
it's funny that you mentioned that, because I've had some people, I've read different things over the years where, like, the Malenkos say it was like their dad was in the CIA. Because and that sounds like a strange comparison, but you couldn't even you couldn't tell your best friend, you couldn't tell your girlfriend, like, my dad's not getting beat up. My dad's not an evil Russian. It was just like, and even sometimes a lot of the second generation and third generation stars will say, like, they weren't smartened up until they were well into their teens.
No, you think that must have been crazy, though. Just
totally. Especially in this day and age where people just think that, I don't want to go on a rant, but people just think they're allowed to know everything, or you can't tell anybody what to do. Like, can you imagine coming home and, your father's Bill Dundee? I don't know how people would. I don't know how people would process that.
No, again, it always struck me as an odd thing, because you get things like the Hart family, and there was like 12 sort of siblings there, and it was a wrestling family, and they obviously had sort of brother-in-laws and in-laws and stuff and all that, and obviously now they've had children and second generation and third generation kids themselves, and you sit and think the whole thing's just bizarre anyway. Or you get like the Samoans, and they're all related in some fashion. And sort of from a family perspective alone, I started writing a few stories based on that, and it was just that alone just always compelled me, because it's not a regular job, but it also kind of is, which is really bizarre. So
I make the comparison a lot of times in some of the small stuff I've done. My stuff, the little bit of writing I've done hasn't focused on wrestling too much, but I'm trying to go more in that area. And what I tell people is, I just use the CIA one, but it almost reminds me of like a mafia. You know, who better to bring in than your son?
Yeah, well,
because usually your son's not going to turn on you. You'd like to think anyway.
well, there's been some instances in the mob of that as well. But back in the territory era, in some circles, it was known as the blue collar mafia.
Yeah, and it's just I've never the blue collar mafia. I've never heard that before. I gotta look that up.
It was known as the blue collar mafia at times because obviously,
wow.
it was there was lesser money than say in other organized crimes, but the mob had an interest, especially in the New York era. Allegedly.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't
wrestling
in trouble, but allegedly that was what was always alleged was there was a connection there. So it was always known as the blue collar mafia.
And you know what's really interesting that you bring that up again? Not to I did not have a huge career, so people don't go spend your time looking it up. But you can't believe how many of those guys show up at the matches and absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Just love watching the matches.
Yeah, it's like in Japan, again, allegedly, so I don't want to get in trouble here, allegedly the Yakuza have had connections to professional wrestling over the years, and there's definitely enough connection there. And like I say, I'm a big Sopranos fan, huge Sopranos fan.
Yeah, same here.
I love it. It's the greatest show of all time, always was. Nothing stopped that for me yet. But again, I can sort of draw parallels from that, and I think at some points I kind of use that as a studying point for characters, because I'll be honest with you, I don't have any letters after my name. I'm not a massively educated man. I'm a regular guy. I'm just a working class man, basically from London in the UK, Scotland originally, but kind of move about a bit. And it's just I understood and sort of studied characters from watching television, if I'm honest, more than actually reading books. So to get characters down, and obviously a character like Tony Soprano is massively complex and massively engrossing and massively conflicted at times, and you take that character and break it down to its brass roots, and that almost in a way for me becomes how I write characters. I break them down to grassroots and then figure them out, then rebuild them in my head from there.
It's just, to me, it's massively interesting. And like I said, nice to talk to someone who supports my view. But again, it's just I don't want to keep going back to my experience. I only had a small little experience, but like the things that you see, the little bit that I saw with wrestling, like you were, it was almost like these guys, you see these guys in the beginning with the Sopranos, how, you've got to go through this and you've got to go through that and you get made. I was expected to carry people's bags. I was the chauffeurs. I spent one summer basically chauffeuring the bushwhackers around Southern Ontario.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I had a pre-funded business too, and I always liked hearing the older guys just tell stories. That was always my.
And that's what I was fascinated about. Yeah. I'd like to think I was smart enough to realize, you can't walk in and be a big shot. But I was just amazed sitting down and listening to it, and just the evolution over the years from the guys who were crisscrossing the world. You had your time in a territory. It was time to move on. To the guys who lasted into the pay-per-view eras. And the reason why I find it was interesting that you started with Memphis is this is probably the closest territory to being a national promotion that never really went national, because Bill Dundee never really left.
No.
Lawler went on and had his WWE deal. He had a little bit in the AWA, but these guys, Jimmy Valiant, some of they made their career in Memphis, and for a territory, 18 months, maybe 2 years, and then you had to move on a bit.
Yeah.
And then they brought you back in as a surprise. But that's why I found it really interesting that you did the Memphis one, because you're talking a whole series of books here. I think you could probably easily pull another 2-3 books just out of Memphis.
Well, that's the thing. Next book, which should be out hopefully by the end of the year. I'm kind of working with an editor to turn my words from Stevie's to English. So, I'm kind of working at it, getting that done. Next book's set in Dallas, in Texas, obviously.
Okay.
And so I can kind of I've bounced the two off quite well together. So
yeah, I was going to say, you definitely have a crossover with the promotions going there.
Yeah. So it kind of works. I can bounce from Dallas and to Memphis easily in this book. and then after that I can sort of go every other place. But the one blessed thing is, like you say, because they travel around a lot in them days, you can easily follow a character's entire career through sort of 7, 8, 9, 10 books.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
something I'm looking forward to doing. So
I have always found it absolutely fascinating that there has never been a big Hollywood style production of the Von Erichs, because you don't need to exaggerate anything in that story.
no, there's a lot of tragedy there.
But there's a ton of tragedy, to the point where I think a regular viewer would be like, enough, this didn't really happen. And you go back and look, I mean, Kevin's the only one alive out of 6 brothers.
Well, it's always the one is, when I tell people I've written a book and they ask what it's about, and I tell them wrestling, and they sort of look at me a bit sort of cross-eyed and go, "Why wrestling, Steve? You know, what made you want to know about wrestling?" And then you mention stories like the Von Erichs and their history and their tragedy and suicides and stuff, and then they kind of get it. Basically, they kind of thought, "Oh, okay, actually, there's some tales in this wrestling thing, so maybe he might be on for a winner here." You know, so.
Do you think we could have the Von Erichs in this day of social media? I don't think they would have been able to run that empire longer than a year or two, because unfortunately those boys were severe, to be polite about it, were severely messed up.
Yeah, it's you've got to look at it and think their father played a Nazi sympathizer on TV. So that's bound to have a little bit of an effect on your psyche, I think. I mean, I'm no psychologist, but I reckon that's got to do some damage. But no, I think in some way it's the weirdest thing, because social media is one of the best and worst things to happen, I think, periodically in history, because just the spread of information you can get out there and the vast knowledge that can come back to you and go out to you is brilliant. But there's also a lot of clickbait, and there's also a lot of just, you know, BS. And there's also a lot of people that are just doing things for self-interest.
Well, see,
I think kind of hits the same vibe, I find, sadly.
I was going to say, I think in those areas, Fritz Von Erich would have excelled in clickbaiting his sons, because I mean, there's, you know, people still are appalled years later that, you know, he had what was the big one? He had the heart attack angle, where, you know, if the house went down, he was terribly sick, but if the house money went up, then he was getting better. And it's just their story. I like I said, I've read it a couple times, and I'm sure you're aware of the Dark Side of the Ring series in Canada.
Yes.
Just some of those, again, it's played up for TV, but the Von Erich one, you know, they didn't have to add too much to that story.
No.
Not one of those boys, including Kevin, who somehow overcame it, not one of those boys thought they could live up to Fritz's idealized version of what the perfect family should be.
And then we get a further extension of Von Erichs now with the younger Von Erichs, his children that are now active.
You know what? They seem to be doing really well. They seem to avoid the pitfalls. I don't get to see a lot of MLW in Canada. I do see it occasionally on the internet. I've tried to download a couple things, but they made it very clear that they wanted to carry on a certain type of legacy, and then going to the WWE just wasn't going to make sense at this time.
No, well, we're getting to that stage now with the modern wrestling where you don't need to go to the WWF right away. Basically, you can, you know, you can make your bones elsewhere and go in a later period. And we're getting to the stage now where there's so much talent about anyway that there's such a vast array of talent around it. Anyone can just work anywhere now and get their stuff out there.
I think it's an interesting theory, because to me, what I would always try and explain to people was the WWE, the WWF, the WWF, whatever you want to call it, was usually the pinnacle of your career.
Sure.
Right? You had done the territories, maybe you had gone to Japan, maybe you'd hit up wherever, and then you went and you had your big money feud with Bruno Sammartino.
Sure.
Or you know, they tagged you up. I don't think those guys were ever meant to stay around as long as they did. And I mean, like, I was thinking about, there's a pay-per-view on tonight, and the title match is Dolph Ziggler and Drew, what's his name now? They changed his name. The guy who's the champ, Drew, is it Galloway?
Drew McIntyre.
Drew McIntyre, sorry. Ziggler's been there for almost 15 years.
Yeah, it's the worst.
And that was unheard of. And I like Ziggler. Like, I'm not knocking Ziggler, but like, he's been there almost 15 years. Like, this was not, you know, you ran in, you had your money shots. Maybe they brought you back to continue on the feud, and then, you know, you gave the next guy coming up the star treatment or the rub as they call it, and then that was it. Maybe you were back here and there, but it's just it's run on a totally different dynamic now.
Yeah, it's hard to put into words. I kind of liked it when guys moved around, to be honest. You know, it's like it kept everything nice and fresh.
My all-time favorite era is just before the Monday Night Wars, when things were starting to heat up.
Yeah.
Just before everybody had the internet, when you had to turn your TV on and you'd be
Yeah.
like, oh my God, this guy's in the WWE. Oh my God, this guy's. I used to love that.
Yeah, because you could tune in. You didn't know who was going to go where. You didn't know what was going to happen. That
No,
nice.
and I don't mind seeing some of the spoilers on TV, but for example, a couple of years ago, when they let Bray Wyatt win the title the first time,
Yeah.
it was written in stone that he was winning the title solely for Orton to defeat him at WrestleMania. So what was the point of caring about those 2-3 months?
Yeah, that's always something that's always annoyed me is I don't know if it's just because things leak on the internet or because they get a bit formulaic with their storytelling, so you can kind of tell which way it's going to go. But sometimes it just sort of, when a guy gets the big coronation, you sort of think, is this a change in the guard, or is this just another guy? Which is always kind of annoyed me. But I think with all these other companies, with things like AEW turning up, hopefully they can get them out of their comfort zone a little bit and make them, a little bit less predictable, I think.
Do you like it, AEW?
I do and I don't. There's a lot of stuff I like. There's a lot of stuff I don't like there, but it's a growing thing, isn't it? So it still feels like they're still trying to find their feet a little bit. So
absolutely.
It's hard to watch the company growing, if I'm honest.
You know what? I've personally never been a fan of Cody. It's too bad that we can't do the screen thing. I've met Dustin Rhodes a couple times. Actually, it's funny. Quick little story. Told you I wasn't going to try and interfere too much. We're having a great talk here, but I met Dustin Rhodes when I was trying to break in. And when I was bouncing. And super nice guy. We let him on the mic in our club. People were having a great time. And when he left, he grabbed a napkin and he said, here's my phone number. If you ever make it down this way, give me a call. We'll put you up on the couch. This is just before he was Goldust. And I said, wow, that's great. That's awesome. And I got home and I remember the girl I was seeing at the time said, you're an idiot. There's no way that's the guy. He's just blowing you off. So we picked up the phone at like 4 a.m. Knowing he wouldn't be home because we just saw him in the bar. And hey, click, hi, hey, this is Dustin. Leave a message after the ring. So some of the guys are totally 100% on your side. And then I've met some other guys that they treat everybody like a 10-year-old and they try and do the whole, kayfabe and it's real. And so, I mean, there's some great guys out there. But anyway, I'm not a big fan of Cody. And this whole giving him the title to keep him on TV is just that a company that size doesn't need all those titles right away.
No. Well, I've got a Dusty Rhodes tattoo. I've got a Bionic Elbow tattoo on my elbow. So I'm a big fan of the Rhodes family. I think with the AEW, like I say, there's a bit too much. It's kind of like the whole Triple H thing again, or the whole Booker's son thing again, isn't it? It's like, these guys are kind of, they've got skin in the game. They're promoters, but they're promoters basically. So they have the belts, and you look at it and think, well, how much of that is a genuine need to establish them, and how much of that is vanity? But Cody. At first, I couldn't stand it, but it sort of grew on me over time.
I don't find him a bad talent. I don't find him. I'm not trying to sound like an expert on talent. He just, to me, I think the two biggest problems that the WWE suffer from in the last 10 years is that everybody has to be a star, and everybody has to be 50-50 booking. That if you beat a guy somewhere back down the line, you have to come and beat him. You were mentioning Jake Roberts earlier. And Jake Roberts always said, I wasn't the top of the card. I was the spot you hit before you got to the top of the card. And it just, that seems to be so far removed that, up until probably 95, I could tell you every world champion in the AWA, in the NWA, in the WWE. I couldn't tell you the guys in the last year because the belts change hands every 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's bizarre, and there's so bloody many of them too now as well. I mean, you've got like a brand split within that company plus the NXT, so that's 3 championships. Yeah. There's 3 world titles there, and then you've got all the others to follow as well. It's hard to keep up, I find. I
You
don't know
watch
how,
any NXT? Or sorry, not NXT. Do you watch any TNA over there?
We try to. We do get it over here in the UK, but it's really strange. I'm not watching a lot of anything right now because I've got to be honest. Without the crowds, everything just feels so bloody flat right now. A good crowd can make a great match, in my opinion.
We were talking about this before we came on, and again, if people are finding anything, you can go back to the old argument. It's fake. It's predetermined. It's whatever. Those guys are feeding off the crowd.
Yeah.
For when you hit your big move, for when you make the turn in the match, from when you do your dastardly heel move, they're talking now. There's already plans that the next WrestleMania will be limited to 20,000 people. That's still a pretty big crowd. But to do these big moves, like last year, that Otis guy, when they finally did the thing with him and the girl and all that, can you imagine how that would have went over in front of a crowd?
Yeah, well, I remember seeing that was the night Drew won the title, and I mean, for a British guy like me or a Scottish guy like me originally,
huge deal.
That was the first time we've ever had a Brit win the world title, and that should have been that should have been in front of a crowd of thousands going crazy for that, with the Scottish flag flying everywhere and everything. But
he had his celebration in the ring and this and that, but it's just it's not the same thing.
No, and a win over Brock's not something they just give to everyone. That's the
which should have been massive. Which should have totally, absolutely, 100% been massive. I kind of, I can't say I feel bad for the guy because he's champ, but I kind of thought to Drew, like, one of these, renowned 75,000 people houses that WrestleMania is so well known for doing. Yeah, that it didn't happen.
No, it's such a shame. But
let's talk about your podcast for a little bit. Let's move on to there because like I told you earlier, I don't want to get in a tangent because I'll take up your whole day and use up all the space in my computer. Let's talk about wrestling at the movies. Why is that the title? Is that working in some kind of inference? Are we only talking about movies and wrestling? Are we talking about both?
Well, me and my co-host Elliot, we basically noticed that there was a lot of times wrestlers would do movies or they'd be wrestling movies. They weren't always good, but they sort of had a certain compelling. We're both film fans, we're both big film fanatics, and we're both wrestling fans. I thought, well, if we combine the two, we might just get something out of it. Initially, we started doing it straight, but I'm a former stand-up comedian myself, and he's a very funny young man, so we just kind of went with the comedy aspect because some of these films are very difficult to take serious. We just reviewed a movie called Firepower, starring the Ultimate Warrior from 1993.
Oh, so terrible.
It is a bad
terrible.
It's a bafflingly bad movie. We'll have that uploaded in the next few days. But my lord. So we just started doing them, and obviously Hulk Hogan's never really had a good acting movie. He's
come on.
Well,
he was robbed of the Academy Award multiple times.
Oh well, yeah. I guess Santa with Muscles should have easily been, that should have got an Oscar at least,
I can't lie. I've probably seen No Holds Barred about 9 or 10 times. Well, the other ones I've sat through maybe once just to say, okay, I watched them.
Yeah, I remember the funniest one in that was you have Stan Hansen turn up. It's the kids' film, No Holds Barred, because it's obviously tallying into the 1998 the WF at the time, and you have like a bit there with Stan Hansen sort of. You've got two executives taking a toilet break. He goes over and laughs at their junk, and they both sort of foul themselves.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's just full of so many weird out there little bits like that you think, well, how can you not watch that and be entertained?
You know what? Hogan himself has become such a cultural icon and such a big deal. It's horrible that he's tarnished his legacy. In the last couple of years. That's a whole other story. But I if a Hogan movie's on, I'll stop and watch it.
Yeah.
Thunder in Paradise, I blew off many a Saturday afternoon watching back-to-back episodes of Thunder in Paradise because I had nothing better to do.
Well, if there's a Hogan movie on, I'll watch it. I'll review it.
Yeah.
Like video on it, and we will scratch our heads and laugh at so silly at the absurdity there is.
Are you aware of Kayfabe the movie?
Yes, documentary style movie, wasn't it?
Love it. There's one I watched repeated times. Times.
outside of a wrestling audience, that must leave people shaking their head. But as a wrestling fan, I'm watching it and I'm loving it. Damn, I watched that with a girlfriend of mine once, and she was bored, completely senseless by the end. But I was completely glued to the set. I loved it.
It's got a little too much inside references, but just, the guy who's got to bleed in every match, the guy who's totally useless, the guy who thinks he has to go over all the time, the guy who can't get over at all. And the two main guys, I'm not going to say I'm friends with them, but I've met them on occasion. They're actually really good guys. The guy who plays Randy, and then the guy who plays the trainer and Marco Payne,
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
are long-time independent wrestlers in Canada. And there's been, I don't know about worldwide, but they've been asked repeatedly to do some kind of sequel to it, because they pretty well tell you at the end of the movie that the promotion is gonna start up again. I love. Any other favorites on that small little list?
Well, obviously the Wrestlers does the crown jewel of the wrestling movie,
Oh yeah.
by far. I think there's I'm trying to think what it was actually.
The old one from the 70s, The Wrestler with Ed Asner and all the AWA guys.
I've got that to watch. I've not seen it yet. I want to give that a good review because obviously it's AWA and there's not. AWA is the one that gets overlooked, I find, as well in history. You don't hear much about AWA these days.
Not anymore. It was a huge deal when it was when it was around. But I mean, this will tell you how old the movie is. In the credits, it says introducing Ric Flair.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's how old that one is. It's great from a historical perspective, but it's just they never drop the pretense that wrestling isn't real. But then they show you a whole bunch of behind the scenes stuff, so you're kind of like, I don't know, type of thing. But is that mainly what you're dealing with in the podcast? You're looking at movies from that end, or are you talking pay-per-views, angles, that kind of stuff?
We tend to sort of want to throw as much against the wall as we can, see what we enjoy. I think the worst thing you can do with any kind of podcast or any kind of interview or anything like that at all, or any creative endeavor at all, is not enjoy it, basically. And I think if you're doing these things that's just formulaic, then it shows and it's just terrible. Because I've heard, I don't name anyone, but I've heard a lot of podcasts where people are just watching something and they haven't enjoyed what they're doing, and it just comes across as so entirely flat. I can't stand it. But me and my friend Elliot, he's full of energy, so we tend to bounce off well against each other, and we both enjoy what we're doing. So as long as we're enjoying it, we'll keep going.
We were talking about it before we came on, and I've never seen another industry, another business, whatever you want to call it, where they eat their own. I mean, half these podcasts are just guys that, they hate every move, they hate the storylines, they hate the newcomers. Then why are you reviewing it?
Well, that's the one. I don't understand this because I always think professional wrestling fans are the best fans in the world, because if they love something, they'll love it forever. If a guy is one of their favourites, then my God, they'll excuse any bad match he has or any botch or any bad thing he says online or whatever. But if they don't like something, then God help it, they'll just bury it. So it's like it's getting your stuff out. It's getting stuff out that's good, and pardon me for tooting my own horn, but I like to think my writing's good. I like to think my Wrestling Noir stuff is quite good, and I enjoy doing the podcast as well, and I like to think that's quite good. And I haven't had any real terrible, -5-star reviews yet, so I guess I'm onto something there with it all. But
no, it seems to have gone over well. We're looking to order it this afternoon. I wanted to do it beforehand, but we had already done the thing to do the talk, and I'm like, it's a book, it's about wrestling. I got to buy it. There's no two ways around it. It's amazing. You've bought mine, which I told you earlier. I appreciate. You'll see when you get into it. I've got a little back storyline about wrestling, which was kind of going to be my out in the book if I couldn't write enough about it. But I'm hoping to do a little more in the next one. But what the guy told me was, when we were editing my book, he said, you know what, just leave a couple mentions to it. He said it doesn't work in this one. So I would like to have an entire one too. But it's great to see about the territories and about not just the wrestling, but like we said earlier, you're talking about the family lives and everybody intertwined and what's going on to run this promotion. It's never just one guy.
No. It's an ensemble piece. That's my thing. It's a reviewer claimed that he actually coined the phrase like Game of Thrones with pile drivers.
That's nice.
I love that phrase. I've got to be. I should get on a T-shirt. I absolutely love that phrase.
That's nice. I like that.
Wonderful soundbite that I use all the time now.
Again, I think it's for people who don't get it. I've made no apologies about it. Been a hardcore fan for well over 30 years. I make no apologies about it. People watch their soap operas, watch whatever, but I've basically just gone down to the line. I'm a big punk fan as well.
Sure.
The late 70s, early 80s stuff, and I just every now and then I'll throw on a song, and my wife will look at me and kind of look at me cross-eyed. I'm like, hey, if you don't get it, you don't get it. It's the same way I view my wrestling. If you dig it, cool. If you don't, I don't feel the need to have to explain it to you.
No, it's I just sort of think whether people like it or not, I don't care. I'm having a blast. I always have. I've been enjoying this since the age of 11. I'm not slowing down. I love it. It might not be what it was years ago, but I still dig it. I'm still aware of it. If other people don't like it, that's on them. They're the ones missing out, as far as I'm concerned.
I'd like to talk just a little bit more, and I'll let you go. I wanted to ask your opinions on the whole UK wrestling scene, because you from the timeline that you're talking, you just missed the heyday of Shirley Crabtree and all of them. There wasn't too much going on with UK wrestling. It sounds like when you were starting to be a fan, were you still able to see shows like in the mid-90s? Were you able to track things out?
Oh, well, interestingly enough, my father worked at a thing called Butlins, which was a kind of holiday camp thingy for holiday makers for travellers to come to, because I live on the coast, I live on the seafront. And he was an on-site plumber there, and he made friends with all the entertainers that come through, he made friends with.
Okay.
So you're talking comedians like Mike Reed and Tommy Cooper and things like that.
Yeah.
And he also made friends with lots of wrestlers. And I don't remember this. I was way too young to remember these things, but I remember hearing stories that we would have Big Daddy over the house and Giant Haystacks over the house and Jackie Polo and people like that. And my mum always used to tell me, she always used to regale me the story of the time I saw Giant Haystacks in my house for the first time when I was about 2 years old, and I was terrified of him.
Oh yeah, dude was what, 700 pounds?
Yeah, he's an enormous man, and there I am, like 2 years old or something, and I'm looking up this giant of a monster with a thick Scottish accent and terrible teeth, and obviously I'm terrible. So yeah, I always remember that. I got into. I actually worked in wrestling myself for a company called the Frontier Wrestling Alliance in 2003 to 2005, 6-ish.
What were you doing?
What was I doing? I was setting up the ring. I was doing ringside security. I was running around getting people ready for things. I was I wore more hats there than an experienced tailor. So,
Did you jump in the ring?
I wasn't doing. I jumped in the ring and I jumped straight back out because that stuff.
Oh, jeez.
I had a few training sessions and it's like, holy damn, I thought this was fake. I'm getting killed here. It was like Fight Club or something back then. So, yeah.
Well, the English are notorious for being very good stretchers and hitting very stiff.
Oh yeah, God, it's like being on a torture rack or something for real. So anyone that ever owned a pair of boots and got anywhere with this business, you've got my respect.
Like I said, the English stuff from that period, Tiger Conway, the 70s stuff, all those guys, those were good. There wasn't very much showmanship in their wrestling. And I used to love the old, I'm sure you guys, I don't have to tell you about it. It was in your country, but the old World of Sport.
Yeah, sure.
And some of those matches it's worlds removed of what you see now. Like those guys, there wasn't a move where those guys could have broken your knee or shattered your elbow. And that was the stuff I really loved. I've learned to adapt to the other stuff too, but yeah, just it kind of faded out there in the 90s. And then we were talking earlier before we came on, some of my favorite stuff right now is the NXT UK stuff. Those guys are amazing.
Oh God, there's so much good wrestling around now. It's amazing. Anyone's just not happy as hell, right now. It's amazing people criticize so much because there's so much quality about. It truly baffles me. But that's the UK stuff. Yeah, I've not had the pleasure of seeing it live yet, which is something I definitely want to do. When everything picks up again after the COVID stuff. So that's definitely on my to-do list. Is to go to NXT UK shows. I've been to a lot of Progress shows, which are very similar to NXT and feature a lot of their talent. And that's a really, really good live experience to watch. Actually,
have you been to any of the Progress ones where they they co-promote with Evolve? Because I'm loving the Evolve stuff right now.
No, I haven't seen any of the Evolve stuff, but I remember that they take place in Camden, which is a really, really vibrant, really colourful part of London, and full of music, and just, you know, you've got punk rockers walking around next to businessmen, and no one bats an eyelid. So
I'm the Evolve is some of my favorite stuff right now. Basically, anybody that they're bringing through NXT UK or they're bringing through NXT. Sorry, 1 second. Seems to be coming through Evolve. They've got some great shooters over there. They've got some great workers, and again, like you were saying, you know. Obviously, people are watching the WWE product because, you know, he's on TV twice a week, but there's great stuff out there to look for. You don't need 15,000 people at a show to see some good wrestling.
No, not these days. There's so much out there to watch. I don't. What do you think if you were trying to sort of get the weekly wrestling on TV? I think you're looking at maybe 13 hours there. If you try and take.
Oh yeah, easy.
I don't have 13 hours a week free. You know, so,
no.
You know, so not with the writing I'm doing as well. You know, so.
There was a time, and I'm sure you had this time as well. There was a time where I didn't miss any of it.
No, God. I would sooner lose a limb than miss an episode of Superstars back in the day.
One of my first jobs when I was old enough to stand behind the bar was as a bartender at a local Ramada. And the one and only reason I got that job was because my buddy's father worked there and they had a satellite. And I spent all day watching the USWA, the ICCW from Boston, the AWA when it was still on. I got that job solely so I could watch wrestling.
Well, I'll tell you, I was a tape trading fanatic back in the day.
Yeah.
And so many times a box of tapes would turn up at my house and my parents would assume, it's pre-internet, my parents would assume it's pornography. And they'd sort of, you know, they wouldn't believe that I'd be buying like a big stack of videotapes of professional wrestling around the world.
Yeah.
I remember parents coming in one time and I had an ECW tape on, and you had what's the name, Kimona, one of the Oriental girl doing strip. And I remember thinking, no, come on, no, it's wrestling, Mum, it's wrestling. What? I remember getting so much. It got a little
titillating there in the 90s. I know there was some pay-per-views that I watched. You know, hey, you know, you don't turn, you know, I mean, maybe you weren't totally watching the pay-per-view for those matches, but you didn't turn your head away either when they were doing the silly, you know, bra and panties or wrestling in the mud or whatever. Are you familiar with Congo Khan?
Yeah.
From TNA?
Yeah.
I just wanted to give him a quick little boost here. I know this is your podcast. Super good guy. He got his break in Niagara Falls from a friend of mine who is the local promoter. They do shows under the banner of Neo Pro Wrestling, and Steve is one of the nicest guys in the world. He's actually I don't know if he's still on TNA. I don't know if his run in TNA is done yet, but he basically got his breakdown here, and he was one of the few guys. Him and Ty Dillinger.
Oh right, yeah.
Ty Dillinger was actually trained by Jesse Scott, who's the guy who owns Neo Pro Wrestling. I didn't get to go, but my buddies all went to the NXT in Toronto about 2 years ago when it was Ty Dillinger versus Bobby Roode.
Sure.
And you can see my friend Jesse in the crowd, and he's beaming like a proud parent, just watching them all hit their matches. And and Jesse had a fairly decent career. He got a chance to go to Japan and do some other things too, I'm pretty sure. He actually, if you go, it sounds like I'm making a plug for Jesse now. If you go and you watch the Dark Side of the Ring documentaries,
sure, yeah.
The guy playing D'Lo Brown and all those is my buddy Jesse Scott.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. They're all local thing, and I didn't even realize it. It was another friend of mine who was actually their sound man, a buddy of mine named Lee Beaupre, who said, you know, that's Jesse, right? And I'm like, no. And he's like, yeah. So it's cool how they still kind of get those jobs based on wrestling.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. A day don't go by when I'm on the Twitter where I don't see a picture of some guy, a screen cap of, say, ECW from 20 years ago or WWE from 20 years ago, and you'll see someone in the crowd who's now a big star. So, it's always there, isn't it? It's always there. There's always that, you know, off chance possibility. You never know. When you go to a wrestling show, you never know who you're going to talk to.
There's famous clips of Edge sitting in the couple of front rows for Ultimate Warrior versus Hogan.
There you go. Yeah.
And there is probably the most famous one would probably be Mick Foley sitting in the front row. I can't remember if it's Don Morocco and Bob Backlund or if it's Don Morocco and
No,
Jimmy
it's,
Snuka. I think it's Snuka and Don Morocco, is it?
yeah, it's the cage bump he always talks about, isn't it? So.
Yeah, there's and and Foley talks about it all the time, like he's a geeky 18-year-old kid sitting in the front of the ring.
Yeah, it's well, I say you never know. Whenever I go to wrestling shows, I'm always really chatty and really friendly to people because you just never know if they're gonna be a big star 5 years down the line.
It never does. It amazes me now when you go back and watch them, and you'll see like when they have the skits, one of them will be a police officer, or when they did, I think it was Batista. Actually, I think it was in the UK when Batista came out in the big Rolls Royce that year.
Oh right, yeah.
One of the guys dressed up as a gangster is actually CM Punk.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
But nobody knew who he was at the time. At least I didn't know who he was at the time. So I always find it fascinating when you go back and you see that kind of stuff.
No, well, I'll tell you, that's the segue off wrestling briefly. I remember being at a convention 20 years back, and you had Robert Kirkman, the Walking Dead fame there.
Okay.
And I remember he'd written about maybe 15 episodes of the Walking Dead comic book of the Walking Dead. He'd had 15 maybe comics. I remember talking to him, and I remember just saying, "Do you really think this has got legs? Because I mean, how long can you keep going for this Walking Dead thing for? How long can you go with zombies for to realistically, to be realistic here?" And he looked kind of hurt by that, and I think, well, I guess the joke's on me now because obviously Walking Dead's a massive franchise. So
that's funny.
Yeah,
if people are going to buy it, they can always get their way around it. You know what I mean? They can come up with another storyline. They can put somebody else in. Mr. Pearson, I so thank you for your time. I hope we get to do this again. I told you I was going to kind of keep it to a half an hour, but we've blown past that. I don't want to take your whole day. I'd love for you to come back on anytime you have an open standing ticket as soon as another book is out. To come on. Like I said, I'd like to do more wrestling related stuff. It's just we'll talk about it a little more when we go off air here, so to speak, of why I don't. But I so appreciate your time, everybody. Memphis Noir.
Wrestling Noir.
Sorry, Wrestling Noir. I kept using it as Memphis Noir. I have to go back and change that. Wrestling Noir, real in Memphis. Everybody should check it out. The behind the scenes, the grimy, good old bad days, I guess we could call it, of the territories.
Well, I liked them, and I hope people who read the book like them too. So, but I would say there's no bad days there. I love them.
Should we go anywhere else besides Amazon to find your work? Do you have a direct website or anything I can link up when we put this up?
I've got a direct website at www.wrestlingnoir.com. That's www.
That one I have seen. Yes. Yep.
I'm on the Twitter, obviously. So that's I think that's thy Steve Pearson. That's TH.
Yes.
Someone beat me to the. So yeah, I'm on the Twitter. Don't do much on Instagram. I'm on there somewhere as Wrestling Noir, I think. So yeah.
I have seen you pop up. I have seen you pop on Instagram. So you are there. Not as much as a presence as I've seen you in other places, but you do have. You are there.
Yeah, I think I'm Twitter addicted. But yeah, Twitter and the Amazon and all that. They're the key ones to hit, I think.
That is awesome. I thank you so much for your time. We're going to take this conversation offline. A couple things I want to check with you before we're done. But again, I thank you so much for your time, and I hope this has been great for you as it was for me. Hopefully we do it again soon.
Sure thing. See you at the matches.
Thank you so much for your time, Steve.
Bye now.
Oh.